I wanted to make a video for guys who want to improve their social skills, in particular when it comes to approaching women, making new connections, and overall having social confidence. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I'm not a dating coach. I don't see myself as one, nor do I have an inspiration to be one. I am just a guy who find that having social skills is something that's important as a man. And it's something that I'm always working on improving, so I wanted to share my experience. So whether you're someone who have never went out there to specifically approach women before, I know guys who the idea of going out there to specifically interact with new people is something that's crazy to them. Or you've done it before and you have lost that muscle. This video is for you, because I've been the guy who at one point I never did this before. And I've also been the guy who I used to do it very well, and then I stopped, and then I lost the muscle. So the first thing that you have to understand is that your brain is a social brain. And the reason why, if you're socially awkward right now, what it comes down to is basically a number, right? A number of new people that you're interacting with per week. That number determines how strong that social muscle is for your brain, right? So it's exactly like if you work out, for example, if you were following a strict regimen and routine, you basically slack off with your macros that week and your lifts that week. The following week, you go back in the gym, you're going to feel a difference. So it's exactly how it works when it comes to socializing with people. And what I find to be that perfect number is somewhere around 3-digit number per week. So that means at least 100 women per week or 15 women per day, right? So if you're going out there approaching a minimum of 15 women per day, at some point your brain starts to basically start to disassociate with rejection and mental blockage that you go through. It starts to really reshape the way you look at socializing with people. So that number right there, right? And I would even add the amount of dates that you go to per week. So the amount of women that you are interacting with, new women that you're interacting with per week, and the amount of dates that you're going on per week, that number is what's actually determining your social strength, basically. So if you take a guy, you have a guy who for 3 months straight per week he's been interacting with 100 women per week, and he's going on like 10 dates per week. That guy it's impossible for him not to be different than the guy who goes on talks to 5 new people per week and goes on like a date once in a blue moon, right? So that's the first thing you have to understand, is that this is primarily a numbers game. The neural adaptation that you're looking for, the change that you're looking for, primarily comes from the fact that you are just not putting enough volume out there, right? So what happens with that, though, is that there are a couple things that you have to adopt, a couple emotional state that you have to adopt when it comes to doing this, so it doesn't become something that that becomes counterproductive, right? Because there's two sides of the spectrum here. There's a side where you're not socializing at all and you become socially awkward, you don't know how to interact with people. And then there's another side where you're going out there, you are approaching many people, and then you're doing it to a point where you're neglecting your life, right? Especially if you live in a small city or area where you actually are not walking around and bumping into people easily, like I do. It can get to a point where you're doing this and you're finding that you're improving your social skills, but you're falling behind in life, right? So you don't want to make it to a point where that's what's happening, and I'm going to share with you a couple emotional states that you have to adopt as you're doing this so it doesn't become that way, right? The first thing that the first emotional state that you have to be in when you're doing this is that you have to understand that you're primarily doing this to socialize overall. So remove the idea of trying to land a date and take on the idea instead of you are just generally looking to socialize, right? So what does that mean exactly? So you're going out there, you're doing the whole thing, right? You're doing the whole thing of when you see a woman expressing interest and exchanging phone numbers and looking to make something happen. But the emotional state that you're pulling from with that, it almost has to be something that you have to, basically you're going out there, that's not really your goal, right? Even though you're doing it, so you could have two people, they're both doing the same thing, but the emotion or the state which it precedes is completely different, right? So it's not that it's not that you don't want to land the date, but it's like that's not why you're going out there and approaching women. That's not that's not the main reason. Or almost better, maybe the best way to put it is that you don't care if you do, right? You're indifferent about the idea of landing the date. So for instance, when I'm talking to a girl, I see her, I'm approaching her, what's going in my mind isn't, okay, I hope I land this date or I hope something happens. I'm actually like, I don't care if it happens, because the goal that I actually have is to just socialize. And I'm using the women, I'm using the process of expressing interest and landing dates as a process to my goal, but my goal isn't really the date itself, if that makes sense. So the dates and the connections that happens are a byproduct. They're just like a downstream effect of what I'm doing, but my primary intention isn't actually that. And that's actually a good thing, because the thing is, I don't want every woman that I approach to say yes to me. If every woman that I approach said yes and actually went on a date with me, that would get unmanageable very quickly, right? So I actually like the fact that most women that I approach don't say yes, because it gives me a chance to practice, right? So the outlook that you have to come at this with is that the primary reason that you're doing this is to create the neural pathway that happens when your brain is interacting with new people. So every single time you find a situation that you're uncomfortable in, and you engage and you socially interact, you make the move of engaging that situation, there's a pathway that gets created in your brain. So that's the place where you have to come with about this, where that simple switch makes it to where the whole experience isn't about the women. It's really about you. It's about yourself, and it's about basically you developing yourself. That's how you have to look at it, right? That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, you might be hearing me say this and you're like, well, 15 women per day. If you've never went out and approached people before, you might think that's a lot of women. How am I going to make this happen? What I found is that in most cases, when I thought it took me a long time to meet new people, in reality, there were several situations that I saw, but I was blocking them in my head, right? So I would mentally checked out of those situations. I would say, well, that situation right there, I'm not going to engage that. That situation right there, I'm not going to engage that, right? Or, well, she's doing this right now, I'm not going to engage that. So what happens is, when you look at the scenario as socializing in general, rather than trying to land a date, it removes the pressure of finding social boundaries. Because what you'll find is that in most cases, you can interact with almost anybody. You can interact with almost anybody in virtually mostly a lot of situations that you didn't think you could interact in, right? All of a sudden you're looking at this like, okay, yeah, I'm just socializing with people in general. All of a sudden you find a situation that you didn't think you wouldn't have normally approached, because your mindset before was to actually get an outcome. You're like, hey, how's it going, ladies? How y'all doing today? Oh, we're doing good. Oh my God. Okay, I like the style. I see what y'all doing over here. Okay, I like it. I like it. You know, you start talking, you start interacting, and all of a sudden, by accident, you find yourself in a conversation. And you're like, wait a minute. I can't believe I just interacted in that situation. Right? So that's the second thing you have to realize, is that a lot of those situations, there's a lot more situations that you can interact with than you think. There's a lot of situations. And when it comes to, let's just say, if you're doing 15 a day, you go out to a venue, you walk in, you count how many people you would approach, you would say something to, you'll find that there's at least 5 people in there. And those 5 people, you do that with 3 places, that's 15, right? That's easily 15. And it's not something you have to overly focus on. If you actually let yourself go in terms of removing the mental barriers, you'll find that there's actually a lot of people that you can talk to, right? So that's the second thing. The third thing with that is that when I'm out there and approaching people, I have this mentality that no one deserves too much of my attention that hasn't really done anything for me, right? So the reason why I'm saying that is because there's something that's important, right? When you're going out there and approaching women in particular, because first of all, most of you're probably trying to land a date. And second of all, if it's something that you're actually going out there to work on your confidence, you're going to find situations where you'll hesitate, right? Where you'll be like, yeah, this isn't the perfect moment. Your brain is going to try to make it a perfect situation to then approach. And the way I kind of work around that is that by me looking at that situation or that person in that scenario and waiting and analyzing, I'm giving that person too much importance. And I just don't find it logical how I can give someone so much importance by actually having them the topic of my mind when they haven't even said anything. You see what I'm saying? Like, they haven't even said anything and they already have that level, they're taking that much space in my head, right? So for me, it's almost like, okay, not only one, I'm just socializing, I'm not really looking to get an outcome, although I'm doing everything that someone who would want an outcome would do. Make sense? But the thing is, this person doesn't deserve to have that much space in my head. So when I see the person, the moment they come into my awareness, the less and less time that they are allowed to have in my head, that before I say something. You see what I'm saying? So I will say something, I will engage the person, and then if their energy is not there, if they're not responding in a way that I like, I move on quickly, right? So I strike quickly and I move on very quickly. That's how you have to look at this. So it's like when I see someone new, it's a situation where I almost have no choice but to engage them immediately, because I'm looking at them and they're intriguing me. And the more time I'm spending not approaching, the more they're taking space in my head. And the more they're taking space in my head, I'm actually putting this person on a pedestal of overvaluing them by not approaching them. So it's like in my head, you're not all that for me to not say something, because you haven't really done anything substantial to me yet, right? So those are my 3 experiences or sort of outlook that I've picked up on as I'm going out doing this. Hopefully it's helpful for you. If that's something that's important to you, let me know if you have any questions, comment, concern. Have a good one.